school and concerned about the colleges and friends and peer groups and the army and so many things coming up. We have to come up with some way to help kids get through this period. And we want them to do it Jewishly as well as emotionally, as well as Americans and everything else. The Synagogue Youth Program, USY in particular, gears itself towards that part of a teenager's life as well as the parts that Norman mentioned. Norman was correct in everything that he said. We shouldn't forget this personal part, is to help a teenager get through the teenage years in the most productive and best way possible. They can be dynamite years, and they can also be very painful and very troublesome. Tremendous need for friends, for belonging to something, something to help with your self-esteem. USY does that as well. And that's another important reason for a synagogue youth program. I just wanted to add that part, because we shouldn't be so parochial only to think in Jewish terms. There's a kid as a mensch, and he has to be looked at in that fashion as well.
They have
Now,
needs which we have to service, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think that very often gets lost in the purpose of the work, and I'm glad that you added that in. What are some of the kinds of programs, the different kinds of programs that are available for the different age groups, for the different kinds of youngsters that may be involved?
We try to capitalize on what is inherent in a teenager at that age. For example, teenagers can be very social conscious. You know, if you look at many of the South American countries, revolutions often take place with teenagers and college kids, because they get involved in social ideas and they have goals and, you know, that kind of thing. And so that kind of social program is very important for a teenage years. It capitalizes on something that's in the teenager. So we have a Tikkun Olam program. Tikkun Olam literally means to correct the world, to rebuild the world, to refashion the world. It admits there are problems in this world, and what can we do to help? So when you take a teenager and say, look, there are problems with people living in Russia, there are problems with Ethiopian Jews, there are problems with the poor in this country. These people need help. What are we going to do about it? Teenagers react to it. And so as a result, the Tikkun Olam program, the social action program of USY, is a very strong kind of a program.
Do most youngsters, in fact, respond to that kind of program?
In New Jersey, we've been very successful. In fact, nationally we've raised tremendous amounts of money, but that's not the only thing. Although raising money is important, not for the money itself that we raise, although that has to be looked on also with some regard, but we're training kids to support charity. We're training kids to know that you support not just with your mouth. A lot of people support with your mouth. It's very easy to say the right things when you're sitting in your living room and there's no one there to hear. But to teach a kid that you support your mouth with your deeds, you got to take a couple of bucks out of your allowance. You've got to run a program that's productive. You know, so you raise a couple of bucks.
You have to decide which charity to give the money to.
And that also is an education.
And they participate in that.
Absolutely, absolutely, right.
To answer your question more broadly, our youth programs are designed primarily to two age groups. We have the Kadima, who are 7th and 8th graders, and these programs are geared to the peculiar needs of and interests of children that age. So the programs tend to be more socially. There is always an educational aspect to whatever programs are run, but these kids at the Kadima age groups will have, they'll have dances, they'll have Shabbatonim, they have an encampment each year where they spend a week of total Jewish living. They have a weekend and spring events. On the other hand, the USY, who are children in the 9th through the 12th grade, have a more diversified and broader program. So their programs include dances because socials are very important to kids. They will have kinusim, they will have area kinusim. They have a leadership training institute whereby we endeavor to train them in the skills of leadership. The Tikkun Olam program that Rabbi Horn mentioned, they have an international convention, as for example, in December we have from this region alone 101 kids going to Tampa, Florida for an international convention of USY. There will be roughly 1,000 kids at this convention, and they'll spend a week studying together, learning together, socializing together, meeting kids from all over the country. It's a great experience. We have such events as a Shabbat Enhancement Weekend, where we try to get the children who may not be experiencing the true Shabbat in their home environment to learn what a true Shabbat observance is. We have a college-bound weekend where kids who are in their senior year are exposed to the various college programs where they're not going to be isolated as Jews, and we try to guide them in their choice of colleges. They have a spring convention where they have not only the social amenities that go with the convention, but they conduct the business of their USY as well. In all, it's a very, very broad program that we think does a great deal for the kids and a great deal for the Jewish community.
One of the things that each young person really has to decide for themselves is whether they want to get involved, whether they want to make a commitment to being part of it. Could we address the question of why it would be important for a young person to make that choice, to actually be part of a USY chapter, to be an active part of the youth program? What would be the reasons that would be used to explain to a young person why it would be worthwhile?
Are you trying to build a situation where we're talking to a kid? If I was talking
Yes,
to a USY,
yeah.
what would I say to him?
Talking to someone
We're
who's
trying to
USY
explain
age.
to educated adults
No,
why USY is
to
important.
a USYer, to a potential USYer.
Oh, I try to open up the broad span of our program. First of all, what do kids want? Kids want to be with kids, whether it's USYers or Kadimaniks. Kids are most at home with kids. And they want to find a group, whatever group it might be. We want to get them into our group. So if we can present a program that is as diverse as our program is, that has social aspects, that has an athletic. We have a basketball league. I don't know if you're aware of that, Jack.
Yes.
But you are aware of that. Oh, good. We have a basketball league. We have programs that involve the intellect, the emotions, and good Jewish programs so kids learn to feel at
How
home
many
in their
kids do we
tongue.
have? How many kids do we have?
In the whole region?
In a whole region.
Norman, what was our last count?
Well, between Kadima and USY, we have roughly 3,500 kids.
3,500.
3,500, so
Yeah.
it's not a small organization.
No, it's a
rather
larger
large
organization.
Right.
Okay.
And kids probably come in for different reasons. You know, as you're thinking about it, there's no one reason that's going to apply to all kids, because every kid is different. How do you get an adult to come into the synagogue? You have to work with that particular adult. There are kids who come in because of the basketball, and then they stay to do things other than basketball. Kids come in because they like religious ideals, and they want to get involved with that. Kids come in because of the social. Kids come in because they know other kids. It'd be my job to try to make the kid feel, look, come on in, we like you here. Nice group of people. Give it a try to be with us. And then when the kid comes in, you try to work with him and make him feel at home, let other kids get involved with him. Hopefully he'll find something he'd want to stick around for.
Does a young person have to be especially religiously oriented to be part of? Would they feel out of place if they
No.
weren't necessarily religiously
Not
oriented?
at all. Not any more than an adult who is not religiously oriented feels out of place in our synagogues.
Mhm.
Because kids come in for different reasons. And we'd hope we'd be able to reach each kid where he is. See, that's the thing we try to do. We may have 3,500 kids, but these are small groups they're working in. That's the basic unit is the chapter. And in the chapter there's an advisor. And the advisor's trying to reach each kid at the point where that kid is. Some kid has to be helped a little bit in this area. Some kid has to be encouraged. Another kid has to be given an opportunity to be a leader. Some kids are religiously oriented. Some are not religiously oriented at all. But they find something else, and hopefully, eventually, they'll become more religiously oriented. That's our hope. We make no bones about it. We have goals.
How about those kids that perhaps come from families that may not be in a position to spend the kinds of money that some of these programs
Yeah.
actually cost? You know, like the trip to Israel pilgrimage for USY
Expensive. It's
is
very
not an
expensive.
inexpensive
Well, we
fee.
are in a position to offer some help. Regretfully, we do not have the funds to offer the kind of help we'd like to have. We would like to be able to send every kid to Israel for a summer, regardless of what their means might be. We don't have that kind of scholarship money available. But we do have, through Tikkun Olam and through private scholarship endowment drives that we run, some money so that in most cases, a kid who does need financial help does get it to some degree. Incidentally, Jack, ask me, I'll tell you. What is the importance as an adult, among other things, for these programs? I think we all consider the fact that the mounting problem of interdating and intermarriage is one that we are gravely concerned about. And while our youth programs are not a cure-all, most certainly they do influence the social lives of our children and many times create an impact that keeps them going in the direction we'd like to see them going. So it has a very important purpose.
We mentioned the USY pilgrimage. Could you talk a little bit about what that program means and what kind of an impact that could have on a young person's life? In my own case, I know 2 of my children have been on that program, and I can tell you that it made a big difference in their lives. Can you talk a little bit
Absolutely,
about
we
it?
see that all the time. The kids have a summer in Israel. And it's not just voguing around Israel. They have a dedicated cadre of people up there who are constantly working with them and teaching them and exposing them to a kind of an emotional, religious, academic, multifaceted kind of a program. And the kids come back with an excited feeling about Israel, excited feeling about themselves. It deepens their own sense of Judaism. The approach is so multifaceted that when the kids come home, as you know from your own kids, they're just almost bewildered. They've absorbed so much that they're excited, they're happy, they're pleased, and every one of these kids comes home, I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to have to go back, there's no question about it. It's because they've been reached that way. It's a wonderful kind of an educational experience. And Norman is right. I wish we could send every kid. But you know, many of our congregations have scholarship programs. And that's one way to help a youngster. Secondly, the region has. And sometimes we just go out and hustle for a kid if that's what's required. We try our best.
I think there are also some funds available from Federation to help.
In some areas, that's true. In some areas, that's true.
One of the things that I've noticed over the years is that there seems to be a trend in the way the youngsters are responding to the USY program. As a matter of fact, if we go back, let's say, 10 years or so, or even 15 years, I think there was a different attitude that we were trying to deal with, and there seems to have been a shift. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Norman, you're older than I am, so you probably remember those times much better than I do.
Oh, I certainly do.
Right. So go ahead, Norman. Why don't you tell the people?
Okay. It's a rabbi I have to listen to.
Good. It's the first time you've ever said that.
I think, among other things, the kids today are more career-oriented than they were. I think they're more concerned about their college years than they were. I think perhaps they're less idealistic. You know, if you compare what you see in kids today as you did in kids in the Vietnam era, and I think they're more receptive to authentic Judaism, which I believe conservative Judaism presents to them. So I think there's a very positive shift in the attitudes of kids.
I'm just add, I think it's on the upswing now. I think if we go back just about 5 years, you said 10 or 15. About 5 years ago, I was concerned. There didn't seem to be as much life. I see now a more positive attitude. Our own numbers, for example, are increasing. At a time when the population is diminishing, our numbers are increasing. I have a feeling that in terms of ruach, they're not as strong.
Ruach is?
Ruach, you know, the spirit, the kids get up and they sing, and I remember going back 10, 15 years, and I've been with Youth Commission that long, Ruach was the big thing. The kids would get up and sing for hours. I don't see that as much, but I see really more involvement in social action programs. So if I were to phrase it positively for PR, I would say there's probably less of the fringe and more substance, because they're really involved in substantive issues now. And that's a big difference, I think, in terms of where I'm sitting. Do you see the same thing, Norman?
Yes. You know, with less numbers than there were 10 years ago, our programs are sold out each time. They're oversubscribed. We have to turn kids away because we can't house them at our conventions. Our last convention and the convention before was oversubscribed. We did not have room in the camp to house all the kids who wanted to come.
And so was our encampment.
Right.
Our encampment was
So,
oversubscribed.
you know, it's a real positive sign about how these kids are responding to what we're doing.
One concern that I know parents have in many youth programs is the whole question of drug abuse.
Oh,
Is
sure.
this a problem in our program? Do we have much of that?
It's a problem with every teenage program. And any person working with teenagers who doesn't recognize it as a problem is kidding himself. Okay? And no one can get up there and say, in our teenage population of 3,000 kids, there are no drug problems, is not being truthful. Of course there are. Of course there are. And it shows up from time to time. We're dealing with it as best we can. First of all, we have standards that we adhere to very, very strictly. The kids know if you're going to play those games, you can't play in our ballpark. Right? If we know a kid is in this kind of a problem, we try our very best to reach out to them, try our very best to make contact, try our very best to find out what we can do to help this kid. The problem is around, and the problem is severe. And we have to constantly be alert to it. If I had my druthers, if I had my way, if I had unlimited resources, you know, which I'm not used to having because I work with the United Synagogue organization, but if I had that kind of unlimited resources, I would bring in the best possible people from all over the world to come and speak to these kids here in New Jersey and speak with them from every viewpoint, including the religious viewpoint, the Jewish viewpoint, as well as what it does to you physically, emotionally. Kids are getting this in high school, and yet it's not enough. It's not enough. It's a very serious problem.
Would you say to a parent that the programs that we do run are relatively safe? It's a benign environment in terms
sure.
of
In terms
they
of what's
can send
going
their
on?
children without having to
Absolutely.
worry about getting involved in.
Three of my kids went through that program. My young son, Moshe, is still involved in this program. I'm very comfortable with his being involved in USY. I'm very pleased he is, just as was my older girls. There's no question about that. What I'm trying to say is not that be afraid of sending your kids to USY. I'm saying, first of all, parents have to open their eyes to what's going on. And that's necessary. Second of all, different types of activities make themselves more or less available to drugs and alcohol. The kind of programs that we have make themselves not at all available to drugs and alcohol. Yet there are kids who sometimes do it. And there are kids who sometimes bring it. And we search it out and we look and we're on, you know, always, not to catch a kid, that's not the point. The point is to help a youngster. And what can we do? You know, I think they're relatively clear. Nevertheless, it's a problem, and I don't want to close my eyes to it, and you can't close your eyes to it.
One of the problems that I know we try to deal with is the whole area of getting people to act as in leadership roles in our youth programs. What kinds of people are we looking for to become leaders and advisors in our youth programs? What kinds of people can we encourage to become interested in that kind of thing? What kind of qualities does it take to be a leader of a youth group, an advisor?
Well, the practical facts and the ideal situation are really very far apart. Because one of the biggest problems we have in our work is the fact that the role of a youth advisor or youth director is one that is tremendously important in our opinion. And yet, in terms of livelihood, in terms of recognition within the community, it ranks very low on the ladder. So that, again, if we were to have unlimited funds, we would put these resources to training and developing people to become youth advisors and youth leaders, train them properly, and compensate them properly, and recognize them properly within the community. Regretfully, that situation seems to me to be far in the future. I suppose primarily because of financial constrictions that exist. But most certainly, when you're looking for the ideal person, you look for a well-educated, well-rounded person, one who could relate to kids, and one who loved his work, and one whom kids and adults could recognize, as long as it wasn't a rabbi.
So,
Wait, just a moment. I can't let that go.
you mean it could be a rabbi?
First of all, it's possible it could be a rabbi. What it couldn't be is a synagogue president, but it certainly could be a rabbi. Let me add something to what he's saying. Can I be a little controversial?
Oh, by all means.
Is your contract in jeopardy
As
here
soon as
if
the
I say
program
something?
is over, you can be as controversial as
I
you like.
can't be controversial. I'm going to have to be controversial now. One of the sad facts that we face as a synagogue organization, as a Jewish community, is that we have allowed certain professions upon which the whole operation is built to take a terrific shellacking. For example, Jewish education, right? The Hebrew school teacher is no longer a profession because there are not jobs that pay a sufficient amount. There is no dignity that is afforded to these positions. As a result, very rarely do you find a person with the qualifications and the commitment and the background and everything else going into that position because it just doesn't pay enough. So people who have those qualities often wind up. Somebody did a study 10 years after graduation from the seminary, Teachers Institute, most of the graduates were involved in something other than Jewish education. Same thing is true with youth work. If you were to ask me what criteria, what qualities I would want in a youth worker, I'll tell you what I would want, okay? I need someone who has a good group work background. I need someone who understands group dynamics. I need someone who understands informal education. I need someone who understands counseling. I need someone with the qualities that Norman mentioned, who is a mensch, who has a good Jewish background, who has a commitment, who loves kids. And then I'm going to pay that person $2,000. You know what I'm saying to you? I'm saying to you that we have not been far-sighted enough to create positions, because how do we bring this person in? How do we get a person to have these qualities, to go through that kind of an education to come work? So what do? We get a kid who's in college, right, who may be a wonderful kid who had wonderful experiences in USY, and he will work his heart out for us, and he'll be successful. I may have someone who is a parent who wants to give some time, but I very rarely will find a person with all of it that we need.
I guess the clock has run out on us.
I'm sorry.
We really need some more time.
We could have done more. If you'd like to invite us back,
really
we'd
do.
be happy to come back.
Well,
Jack.
I'll have to ask the audience whether it's a
I'll be
good idea
glad
to
to
have
bring
you
my
back.
friend with me too, because
But,
he
will
likes
you
this
drive
kind of
this
thing.
time?
I'll drive.
Okay.
Jack, it's
Okay.
a pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much,
My
really.
pleasure.
It's been a delight. Not only have you really been very informative, but you've also been a lot of fun, as most of the people who do know you can attest to that. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
That's-
It's been a real pleasure.
Did you notice you paid us a compliment?
Yes, I heard it.
I never heard that before.
We would like to thank our guest for joining us for this program. We hope you will tune in for our next program in the series, Judaism Today. Judaism Today is brought to you by the New Jersey region of the United Synagogue of America. We welcome your comments and suggestions, and we invite you to write to us at the United Synagogue of America, 910 Salem Avenue, Hillside, New Jersey, 07205. That's the United Synagogue of America, 910 Salem Avenue, Hillside, New Jersey, 07205. Shalom. Welcome to Judaism Today, a television series produced under the auspices of the New Jersey region of the United Synagogue of America. I'm Jack Weinshanker. With this series, we plan to bring you personalities who are involved in the conservative movement, who in their daily lives play leadership roles in the Jewish community, both in New Jersey and internationally. Our series is dedicated to the hope that understanding will promote goodwill. We believe that Judaism teaches us to work in behalf of promoting goodwill among all people, so we might hasten the fulfillment of our ancient messianic dream.
Our guest is Rabbi Gerald Chernomus from Temple Beth Shalom in Boonton. Our guest this program is a very interesting, perhaps even unique experience for us. He comes to discuss a very unusual practice in Judaism, which many people are not familiar with real close up, and probably have many questions, and we hope in the time that we have that we can address some of those questions and perhaps make people feel a little more comfortable about the ritual and practice of circumcision in the Jewish tradition. Rabbi Chernomus, could you first tell us a little bit about the history, the origin, the meaning of ritual circumcision in Judaism?
Well, ritual circumcision dates back to the time of the Torah. If we look in the book of Bereshit, in the book of Genesis, chapter 17, we find that God gave Abraham the command that he should first of all circumcise himself, and then he must circumcise every male child on the 8th day of birth. And the symbolism and the connection basically is that it is a covenant between the Jewish people and God. God made a bond, a contract with the Jewish people. You will be my people and I will be your God. And the manifestation of that covenant is the word brit, and that's what the word means. And the circumcision itself, or actually the bris itself, is the culmination of that covenant. And we are required in each generation to renew the symbolism of that covenant between God and the Jewish people.
So actually every Jewish boy, when they're born, in order to identify with the tradition, with the religious practice, should undergo a circumcision.
Yes, if I may use the word bris instead of circumcision, that is the Hebrew word, and the distinction really is that many males, Jewish or non-Jewish, get circumcised at birth or right after birth. When a Jew does a circumcision or really a bris, it has much more to do than just the actual medical procedure. We talk about the blessings that are recited at a bris ceremony. That is the time when in a boy's life we give him his Hebrew name, which also makes the connection between himself and the people who are millennia old.
I'm sure the laws involving the bris are very extensive, but could you very briefly summarize some of the key laws and customs involved in the circumcision in the bris?
The primary law is that it is the responsibility of the father to have the bris done. Not necessarily himself, but to get someone who is well prepared. The second is that the bris should take place on the 8th day of birth. The day of birth is day 1, and if we start counting that as day 1, then the 8th day is when the bris should take place. Even if the bris should be on a Sabbath, on a Shabbat, or on a holiday, even on Yom Kippur, that does not move away from the fact that the bris should not be taken. It should not be done.
So there actually isn't any day of the year that would cause a bris not to be done on that day?
Correct. There's no day of the year that circumvents the need for a bris. The other important law is that the baby has to really be healthy. As I learned for Mila to be a mohel, I learned texts of books that really involved what I should look for and how I should treat a child and treat a baby. Nowadays, with modern medicine being so advanced, that I rely to a great degree on the pediatrician of the baby to tell me whether I should not or should do the circumcision. But nevertheless, there are cases when the doctor will say, go ahead and do it, and I will say we should wait. For example, one of the